When I saw that I was going to be the welcomer for David, it made me very pleased, very happy to offer a few words before David shares his words with us. And many of you will have seen the biography that he wrote and shared with you all in the email. And whilst I might make brief reference to that, David was brought up a Catholic and educated at Ampleforth, the Benedictine school and abbey in North Yorkshire, and how he went exploring before taking up his IT professional role and joining the community, this community. But my experience of David is when I was UK coordinator over 12 years ago, and there was David looking after the website, the newsletter, and anything technical, which for me was a godsend. And David is an extraordinary mix of the practical and the spiritual. And his early years at Bonvo was both. I remember going there again just as Bonvo was emerging, and there was David living in a little caravan in the field and coming in all the time to deal with practical challenges, the boiler breaking down, the silting of the lake that we see often in the images of Bonvo. David is a wonderful, faithful member of this community with all the ups and downs that comes with living a full life. So his title, Moo, neither yes nor no, I think it seems to me to be intriguing and typical of a title that David would choose for a Benedict's Well talk. So David, welcome, and we all look forward to hearing what you want to share with us.
Thank you, Janet. And good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Raise a hand if I'm not speaking loud enough. And I apologize in advance if you hear noises off. There's a mechanical digger in the garden digging a pool. But he doesn't seem to be making too much noise at the moment. About 3 weeks ago, I was lucky enough to spend a day at the Meditatio Centre in London with Jim Green, who was leading a day entitled The Gospel According to Zen. And it was a lovely day and nice to be with people who were interested in Zen and fellow meditators, obviously, most of them. One thing it did for me was it clarified my my interest in Zen, which goes back a very long way. When I was a teenager at Ampleforth and sort of setting aside my Catholic upbringing, I suppose, questioning a lot of what I'd been told, what I'd learned at school and through the catechism and such like. I began to feel very strongly that what Jesus was talking about was not some thing or place that we go to when we die if we've been good, but an experience. The kingdom of heaven is something that we can be in here and now. And I didn't see any evidence for that in the sort of the teachings and what I've been told about Christianity, I suppose. So I started looking around and very quickly came across writers about Zen. Even then, I think Thomas Merton, but D.T. Suzuki and others. But it was quite interesting because none of them seemed to explain quite how one had this experience or moved towards it. None of the writers referred to, intriguingly, the practice of zazen, of just sitting as Zen practitioners would call it, what we call contemplative prayer or meditation. And eventually I found an Indian guru who gave me a mantra and set me off on the path of meditation. But what I wanted to say about this day of Zen with Jim Green was it clarified for me, and it's funny what Janet said in her very kind introduction. For me, the essence of Zen is its pragmatism, its groundedness, its focus on the here and the now. And so much of certainly what I was exposed to as growing up as a young Catholic was, well, airy-fairy theorizing and pious nothings, and it just didn't make any sense to me. I read a book quite regularly, I think you might even see it, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shunryu Suzuki. It wasn't really written by him, it was recordings of his talks to his disciples in San Francisco, and but he did read the book and agreed that this was a fair summary of his belief or his thinking. But it's full of very practical advice. I think the first and the most important advice in it for me is that one should sit down to meditate without any gaining idea. And I'd always meditated with a gaining idea right from day one, which was, I'm going to heaven, or this is what I'm doing it for. And it's very hard to put that aside, but what I've discovered is that until one does put aside any gaining idea, any expectation, you're always going to come away, or I'm always going to come away from my meditation feeling frustrated, because invariably monkey mind chatters away. Distractions come and go, and it feels like one has paid attention to the mantra perhaps for a few milliseconds in that whole half an hour. But when you let go of the gaining idea, when you just accept this is what is happening, this is where I am, this is as good as I can do, it becomes much more enriching. And for me, it's the most essential, but also wonderful preparation for the day. Because really, that attitude of not gaining, of not trying to get something, gets me through most of my days. Particularly when doing anything practical. This past week, we've been building a timber frame house, learning lots of interesting new techniques. I spent a few days tiling the roof, which I've always wanted to do and never had the chance to do. And if one approaches the activity without a gaining idea, I'm not going to do this perfectly, I'm not going to do this better than the other person did, I'm just going to focus on doing each thing as carefully and as mindfully as I can. And inevitably, tiles get broken, joints aren't cut precisely as they should have been. But you let go of that. That's how we learn. It's why that, which I think it was Lawrence first pointed it out to us, or to me, that the root meaning of sin in Greek is to make a mistake or to miss the mark. And it's much better and healthier, rather than indulging in guilt and shame and whatever's, to understand that, as I think Mother Julian said, sin is behoovely, I think she said, it's necessary. One only learns by making mistakes. If I miss a meditation one day, I mean, I know it's a mistake before I've done it now, because sometimes circumstances force you to skip it. And the day just doesn't go anything like as smoothly as it might otherwise. Smoothly is the wrong word. One doesn't trip up on difficulties and frustrations. One accepts that that's part of life, really. Janet, I'm slightly worried because I think I forgot to set my timer, and I'm just, yes, I did forget to set my timer. Will you ping me?
I will put it in a chat when your 5 minutes is.
Okay.
I will ping you.
I should explain, Mark asked me about 6 months ago if I would talk to you all, and I was sort of flattered to be asked and a bit surprised, because I did talk to everybody. It didn't seem that long ago. I suppose it was probably 2 years back now, when I was still at Bombo. But something I've always tried to do, if asked to give a reflection on a reading at Mass on Sunday or something like that, is not to plan, not to prepare, to be as open to the Spirit. That sounds very vain, but I don't know how else I can talk about it, but to listen to the passage at the time it is read out, and to see what arises, which is probably okay when you're only allowed to speak for 3 minutes, but whether I've got enough arising for the next 10 minutes is another matter. So if I come to a conclusion, it might be a bit early. I promise not to overrun. So I've spent the last 6 months not preparing, i.e. every time I sit down to meditate, my monkey mind starts making up a talk. So if anything, there's an avalanche of things I wanted to say, rather than a lack of. But as I say, coming back to this, the importance to me of Zen practice and Zen understanding, as Suzuki, for one, and many others would say, it has nothing to do with theology or philosophy or really any kind of thinking. It's putting all that aside. It's stepping out of the delusions of the left brain, the brain that thinks and talks and wants to control and plan and be sure about stuff, that likes to divide the world into black and white. I often think the most important thing, yes, I think the most important thing that Jesus says is do not judge. And I don't think he means, although he does mean it in one sense, do not judge in the sort of moral or legalistic sense of pointing out other people's deficiencies, you know, the motes of dust in their eye as opposed to the log in one's own. But do not discriminate. There is both yes and no. As he says at the end of John's Gospel, and this is really what he's talking about, I think. I pray that you shall all be one as I and my Father are one. That we do not look out at each other and at the world as a multiplicity of things, but as a single integrated unity, a dance. I think I finished.
David, that is so you. That sense of, here I am, this is what I can offer. And I hope what you're left with feeling is it is enough. That sense of the words that you've given us. I have taken a few notes, and knowing you in a small way, I recognise your living. You began with saying about pragmatism. It's not about being airy-fairy or pious. It's about pragmatism. And it seems to me, certainly within WCCN, the life that you've lived in our community, that you have always offered that practical advice, support, physical support. I hope it's okay for me to say to everyone that David's just a couple of years older than me, but I'm in my 70s, and the idea of David being on a roof, putting tiles on a timber building that he is building somewhere locally, and enjoying it and learning it and saying, I always wanted to put a roof on a house, tiles. And so that really is an essence of what I think you give, David. But I've also heard you speak, as you have done today, with great thought and great wisdom. And I notice that Jim is here today, and so is Kim, and you've mentioned both of those in your talk. And you've given us some practical advice to sit down to meditate with an ungaining idea, you know, without expecting gain or purpose or anything except to just be. Now, we all know that. We all know that's what we're asked to do. But you described it very well. I don't know whether you're going to ask something, David. You put your Are you going to go on unmute? You're going to say something, can't you?
Only that I was looking at the chat and somebody asked had I read Cyprian's book on Zen.
Oh, I see.
Actually, oh, anyway.
You will be receiving...
I'm going to type in a message if I may, because I wanted to do this anyway. I'm just going to put my email address in, because if anything came up that somebody wanted to explore or disagree with me about, they can email me. There.
Thank you.
I'll shut up.
He's had that email address for a very long time. So very much that, again, the words that you've just said then, the practical support, the advice, that you are present, that you are part of this community, very much part of this community. And I was also just very grateful for what you've said at the very end. Sin is about making a mistake. and that we're not here to judge or discriminate, and that there is always a yes and a no in all that we do. But I'm going to just end with something that prompted me as I was listening to you. Some of us have just come back from the UK conferences, David, that you've attended over the years. We had Mark Burrows as the speaker, and his title, or his first words to us at the conference, these are the first words he gave us. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack that lets the light in, that lets God redeem us. Only the light in the present tense really matters. So that sense of a crack that is there for a purpose, to let the light in, and that we can never be perfect. We would not want to be perfect. So David, you will receive lots of messages in the chat, and you don't need to recall them all, because Mary, in her gift to us, types them all up and sends them to you. So thank you, David, very much, and much love to you. And we will end with our Benedictine prayer. May the divine assistance be always with us and with our absent brothers and sisters. Amen.
Janet, you give me more credit than I'm due. It's actually a case of copying and pasting. I don't have to type every single word. Thank you very much, David. I just, listening to you, felt an overwhelming sense of peace and calm descending upon me. And the words that you've spoken are so deep. I'm going to need to go away and think about them for a long time. I'm sure everybody else feels similarly blessed by your offering to us today. Turning to next week, we have Brother John, who has spoken to us before. For those of you who don't know, he's a Benedictine of the Olivetan congregation, and he's based at the Monastery of Christ Our Saviour, Turvey in Bedfordshire. He's been there since 1991. Well, the monastery's been there since 1991. The particular charism of the community is hospitality, but also exploring the links between psychology and spirituality. And in Brother John's case, particularly through an obsession with natural history. Hence the title of the talk, Rewilding the Soul. So that's something to look forward to next week. In the meantime, we have David's words to savour and to flavour the week that we are just starting on. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you again at Benedict's Well next week. Thank you all.
Yeah, unmuted. Thank you, David. It is an enjoyment to listen and live in the present. And with all of you, the presents you give us, and when there's a broken tile, lucky you have another one in reserves. And so is God, who always guides you and helps you and overcome the inevitable, the beauty, and also the misery of life. But there is another day, and there's another week, and there's all of you nice meditators. God bless those, because the person who prays does not sin. And that's the beauty of meditating.